He was the attending neurosurgeon to Lawrence of Arabia's accident, where he sustained a head injury from swerving his motorcycle to miss some children that had run out in the road.
Hello and welcome to the Field Engineer. Today we are speaking with Chris Tidy. Some of you will have seen Chris's video on Hard Hat Awareness Week recently. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks. Hi, Charlie, and thanks for the welcome and the introduction. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, Chris, obviously you're an expert in hard hats. You've got a selection on the wall behind you. Yeah, when it comes to hard hats, I often think of construction and the construction industry, but obviously, you cover more industries than that. Give us your what you can tell us about hard hats.
Yeah, well, basically, obviously, yeah, hard hats are worn across many different industries. Not just in construction, but I guess construction is the largest sort of sector, so that's sort of the area that I tend to sort of focus on. But of course you've got foundries, paper mills, manufacturing as well, where sometimes they wear bump caps, sometimes they wear hard hats, depending obviously on the risk. So there's lots and lots of different industries that it actually it encompasses. So there's a lot of hard hats out there on people's heads.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, how did you come into this space? What drove you into the hard hat space?
Yeah, it was super interesting for me. It was a bit of sort of a weird one. I had a friend working for a PPE supply company that obviously done hard hats, but also did respiratory and face protection. And there was a job going there for a sort of specialist technical person within that particular company. And he said, look, come for an interview. And I said, well, I wasn't really looking at changing, sort of industries. He said, oh, no, come. And I sort of had the interview and really liked the people there. Thought it's going to be super cool, working with those type of people. So yeah, I joined, and then suddenly I sort of realized I was in this whole new world, of sort of safety, this sort of PPE, which ultimately is the last resort, as we know, when we look at the hierarchy of controls, but nevertheless, a really important sort of part of it. But what sort of frustrated me really was the lack of knowledge. I think that was sort of the one thing that struck me the most. So I was sort of hell-bent intent in not only furnishing myself with knowledge, because I have a terrible thirst for knowledge. I like to learn lots of new things. But also I wanted to educate people, why were they wearing this bit of kit? And give them an understanding of what a head injury actually is. What does it constitute? What does a head injury actually mean? And it sounds really silly and mundane, but people weren't aware of that. I saw lots of people from when I was working back on site, when you're in this area, stick this on your head, put these on, but no question as to reasoning why, no understanding of the risk really, no understanding of the wear and care of the product. So I think that was sort of for me really, what sort of kicked it in, and then I wanted to get deeper. So the biomechanics, the understanding of what happens to the brain, what happens to the head, what part the neck plays in that impact. But also I was, during COVID, I was heavily into the respiratory side of it, of course. I was working for that company at the time, so I was consulting with the prison service, the NHS, how they could sort of protect themselves against COVID using respiratory systems. So it wasn't just hard hats. I obviously specialize, in that head protection, but there were lots of other things that sort of drove me as well at the time.
Okay. So how long have you been doing this? And can you give us a sense of how the technology has changed over that time?
Yeah, now I've been doing this for roughly around sort of about 12, 13 years, something like that. But funny enough, the sort of the model helmet as such hasn't really changed that much. It was first thermoplastically injected back in about 1952, I think, by a particular manufacturer. Previous to that, they were all molded, so most helmets were, pressed out of sort of molds. But the first thermoplastic sort of came early 50s. But there was this great guy, bit of a history lesson. Now there was this great guy back in the early 40s called Hugh Cairns, who became Sir Hugh Cairns, and he was the attending neurosurgeon to Lawrence of Arabia's accident, where he sustained a head injury from swerving his motorcycle to miss some children that had run out in the road. And Hugh Cairns made it his sort of life's ambition to really study head injuries. What happens to the brain, what happens to the head during an injury, all these different things. And in 1941, he wrote a paper, but of course, after that, Second World War, and things were obviously focused in different areas. It wasn't till after the Second World War had finished that the sort of Ministry of Transport picked up his study and started to look at testing helmets. And these are where our first standards sort of appeared from, back in the early sort of 50s. So 52, 54 were the recent releases of the light duty safety helmet standard and the motorcycle helmet standard, where we needed to we weren't happy with just putting products on people's heads. We needed to understand that the product that we were putting on their head actually gave them some sort of protection, and that was down to this great guy called Sir Hugh Cairns. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So there's plenty of history there. Okay. So tell us. Again, let's focus on the hard hats. I know you've got one by your side there.
Oh.
What goes into to making this device, and how does it protect heads, and what are the leading on to what if you're not wearing a hat? What are the injuries? What are the risks that are associated with that?
Yeah, so pretty much, as I said, it's obviously a plastic. Originally, it started as a HDPE, so a high density polyethylene, but that sort of changed and maneuvered into newer products like ABS, which is acrylonitrile butadiene styrene, so sort of plastic, rubber, and polystyrene sort of mixed together. And obviously, that gives you that hard outer shell to give you the protection. But technology has changed obviously quite a lot in terms of how then that impact is actually spread then across the head. So what we're trying to do theoretically is give you sort of a hard shell to protect yourself, but also give you like a cradle system to suppress the shock. So we're not sort of putting too much pressure on sort of CTC3 of this sort of vertebrae, this sort of top part of your spine. So we're sort of protecting that. But nowadays we have things like EPP, EPS, so expanded polypropylene, polystyrene layers, which actually decelerate the impact. So they're like, if you think like a crumple zone on your
I was
car
just going to say,
bumper,
yeah,
absolutely. It's exactly the same sort of theory. Some of the best helmets have a combination of both. Where they have the EPP, EPS, and the cradle, because you're sort of getting a bit of both worlds really in terms of impact. But for me, it's quite sort of frustrating because when I was going back to when I first started, I saw the head protection industry commoditizing, and I had a great boss called Jeff Ward. And he was, he absolutely 100% understood that, that people were buying cheap helmets. They'd spend 60, £70 on a pair of boots, probably nowadays even more on a pair of boots, but this one thing that was protecting their brain that operated everything else, they'd be spending £6-7 on. So they would be sort of buying a 1952 helmet, if you see what I mean, and not really looking at how technology has changed and how advances of comfort, because that's super, super important when you're wearing these things, all day. Technology of sweat bands, where they disperse sweat, they dry much quickly. Then they allow eccrine sweat glands to actually operate, so your normal thermoregulatory system operates correctly. They were still putting these sort of cheap helmets and not really thinking about, those type of things. So it sort of frustrated me, and that's one of the reasons, why Hard Hat Awareness Week sort of came about, because not only from an education, but to understand, by wearing a better helmet, we are not only giving ourselves better protection, but we're also aiding and abetting comfort and ergonomics and things like that. So yeah, I guess the tech definitely has changed. Helmets like this is a helmet from Guardio, and you can see pretty much, I'll sort of get it into the camera a little bit there. You can see it's got this sort of twice me little a dot there. That means it has an NFC tag which contains your medical information actually on there as well, in case someone needs to scan that. If there's an accident, there's another dot here where you've got MIPS, which is a layer on the inside, like a slip layer, which is designed basically for rotation, so for angled impacts, and super, super comfortable, helmet to wear. But of course it's 80-90 pounds, and I just say, well, look, in the grand scheme of things, for the lifetime of the helmet, it's like 50 something pence a week. So why not? It's a lot less than a cup of coffee. Why not invest that money and make sure you got really good head protection?
Absolutely. And when you put that alongside of risk of serious death or injury without one, no, £90 seems like a drop in the ocean to me. So you mentioned there a certain number of pence a day. Does that mean that these helmets have a shelf life? Do they degrade, or should you be replacing them after, I don't know, a year, 2 years, 3 years? What's your view on that?
Yeah, there is obviously a life cycle of a helmet. It's a plastic product at the end of the day. It does deteriorate. There is a lot of fallacy around the effect of UV in normal use, but these do contain UV stabilizers. You will find there's most helmets on the market have this sort of UV stabilizer, so they are sort of protected against that. But generally, most companies will give sort of a 3 to 5 year use of the actual helmet if you look after it. And that's the other problem. If you're throwing it on the dashboard of the van in, 30 degrees centigrade and just leaving it there, then it's not going to last, for 3 years. It's going to be more like 2 years, So if you look after it, this particular helmet comes with a storage bag. Pop it in the bag, hang it up in the van or whatever, look after it, keep it in sort of a fairly cool sort of place. Then you're good for the sort of 5 year, period. But of course, if you don't look after it, then that does, deteriorate.
Mm-hmm. I have the same frustrations with my children's bicycle helmets.
Exactly. Yeah, look after them, because it's looking after your life. And that's the key, it's a key message. Really think that is protecting this part that operates everything else. So look after that to look after this. That's the main thing.
Amazing. And in terms of, I don't know if you have any statistics to hand. What are the statistics around head injuries a year? What job are these helmets doing? How many lives are they saving? I'm guessing it's thousands, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, helmets do save a lot of people's lives, obviously, but there are instances where, someone bends forward because they've not tightened the helmet properly onto their head. They bend forward, the helmet comes off, and then there's an incident. So there's incidents on bare heads, as well as obviously incidents with helmets on where they give just a linear straight line protection rather than a protection against angled impacts, because these are the end result is different. So our sort of brain's heads cope quite well with a with a linear impact. I always say, if you think of a woodpecker pecking a bit of wood going backwards and forwards, and our brains sort of float in this cerebrospinal fluid, and it copes quite well with a linear impact. But in terms of rotation, where we actually twist the brain, that generally occurs from angled impacts, so ones that are sort of coming at you from an angle. So we need to, think about not only giving protection against linear. We focused very much from a standard perspective on dropped objects initially, but now we've realized that more incidents of things like slips, trips and falls occur, so they make up, I think, about 30% of all sort of incidents through construction or just in general across the board. So when we will look at incidents of head injuries, they account for sort of 23-24% sort of all injuries that are recorded. But of course, when we look at like HSE statistics and things like that, there is an average of 50% underreporting of incidents. So that's another problem. Some of these head injuries are occurring and not being reported. And I always urge, look, report, please report. I know it's a pain, but ultimately it's always good to sort of get it out there, because the more statistics we get, so what manufacturers and people like that, the more safer helmets that we can obviously produce against these sort of types of incidents. So I always sort of urge people. So it's roughly around the 20 odd sort of percent, like the low 20s, that we're looking at in terms of head injuries, and that would include obviously concussion, but most concussions occur from angled impacts, so from that twisting of the brain. So we do need to think about not just protection from straight line impacts, but also protection from those angled impacts.
Okay, perfect. Now you've given us some insight about what the Hard Hat Awareness Week is trying to achieve. You've talked a little bit about that. How can people get involved? What's your hope from the Awareness Week?
Well, look, we've been doing it for a while now. More and more people are getting involved. During the week, we have people that would conduct, sort of hard hat sort of surveys and look at, their hard hats and check to make sure they're in date. Check to make sure, they don't need like a hygiene kit, new sweatbands and new internal sort of components, check for scuffs, scratches. But also during the week, we have other people that use our education pieces, which are on our website, to actually educate people and get people to understand head injuries. On there's a presentation that you can actually use, which actually goes through some statistics and explains, what a head injury actually is. So there's a lot of resources actually on the website for people to use. But we want people to be involved. We just want people to think, look, this is protecting, this helmet is protecting my brain, and invest in your head protection, educate it around your head protection, and obviously understand why you're wearing that sort of piece of equipment. And of course, for those that don't wear it, please wear it, because you do not know when something is going to happen. I've met many a roofer, builder that said, I've not worn a helmet, for 20 years, nothing's ever happened to me. But there's always, there can be one time where something does happen, and if you're not giving it some protection, the end result obviously could be fatal.
Yeah, and it's worth saying as well, it's then not just about that individual, but the ripple effect of that can have, massively impacts the people around you. So it's it's not just about the individual, it's the impact that has for others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on, Charlie. Yeah, I mean, I obviously, as you know, collaborate with Headway and Silver Lining, head brain injury charities, and I see a lot of instances, obviously, of not only how it affects the person, but how it affects then their family, their loved ones. And I always say, look, your loved ones, your family would want you to return safely every single day. Or if you're away, you're on site for a week and you're only returning weekends, they want you to come home. They want you to be safe. But not only think about protecting yourself, think about the comfort, and that sort of ergonomic part. You want to be comfortable. You want to have a helmet that works in conjunction with your body and gives you that protection level, So please, invest in your head protection. It's so important.
Excellent. That seems like a very excellent note to finish on. So, Chris, thank you very much for talking to us today. Thank you very much for your time. To our watchers and listeners, if you do enjoy our content, please do consider subscribing. If you have any comments, any questions, please write them in the comments below. But we shall leave it there for now. Chris, thanks once again. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Charlie, and you take care, and I appreciate the conversation.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.